everyone, my name is Gabby and today I'm back with another review of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Today we are going to be discussing Season 7, Episode 8, entitled After Before. You guys should know the drill by now. I'm super pumped to dive right on in and get started discussing this episode with all of you. So if you haven't watched it yet, go and watch it. But for those of you who have seen the episode, let's dive right on in and get discussing. The spoilers are happening. 708 picks up right where 706 left off. We see Deke walking off of the Zephyr to go and follow Mac. Then Gemma is shouting into the walkie-talkie for Deke to come back. He obviously doesn't do that. Deke and Mac get stuck in the 80s. We get to see all of their adventures in 707. And then this episode shows us everything that's going on with Gemma and Yo-Yo and May during the 20 minutes, half an hour that the time drive is malfunctioning and they're making all of these jumps in the 80s. And I love the fact that 706, 707, and the beginning of 708 all are tied together. I think it's a really smart writing and I thought it was a really great way to open up the episode, and I absolutely wouldn't have expected it. And I was so excited when I saw the episode opening up in that way. I just thought it was brilliant writing. So props to James and Charlotte Oliver who wrote this episode for starting off the story in that way. So as I mentioned, the time drive is malfunctioning. You're having all of these jumps in very quick succession, and that can be very difficult to follow, to know how much they're jumping in time and when the jumps are happening. It's very overwhelming to watch and it can be difficult to follow depending on how many jumps are happening. And the editing for this is amazing. All of the jumps are edited with a flash and a sort of shake of some sort. It's difficult to describe, but if you've watched the episode, you know what I'm talking about. And then in the beginning, we get the dates labeled to see how much time they've jumped. And I think that's really smart. And I believe James and Charla talked about doing the math for all of those jumps to figure out how often they could jump and how much time would be lost, and actually worked through all of that. I don't know to what extent, but I'm really impressed by that and the work that was done there. And it makes me really appreciative that there is research and thought that is put into all of those tiny little details, because it makes watching the episode so much more enjoyable. And I think it makes all of this that's going on much easier to follow when you have a visual representation of what those jumps look like. So then we get to see Deke and Mac walking in through the smoke of the Quinjet with May and Yo-Yo. And I don't know why I really loved this shot. I saw it in the preview for this episode and I really liked it, but getting to see the full thing, it was so pretty. And that's sort of what I want to focus on in this review. The people who are doing the camera work for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. are amazing. There's somebody on Twitter who's been putting together a thread of these really stunning shots from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. throughout all 7 seasons. And I'm just obsessed with every single one of them. And obviously the director is a large part of that, because they're choosing what angles are going to be shot for a particular scene, but it's also up to the camera operators to get that shot. So to all the people operating cameras on S.H.I.E.L.D., thank you for the work that you're doing, because it's immensely difficult and you have given us so many pretty shots throughout this season and throughout this entire show's 7-season run. So thank you for the work that you're doing and for giving us so many pretty camera angles. There's one that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on in the episode, so we will come back to this, but props to all the camera operators on S.H.I.E.L.D. because you're killing it this season and in every season, to be honest. So then we get the title card. The title cards for these seasons have been amazing as well. Who is designing these title cards? They are so good. I don't know if this was my favorite one yet. I really loved it. I don't think anything is going to pass up that intro for A Trout in the Milk. It was just so good, but I loved this intro. It was so colorful and it felt like an upgrade on the season 5 title card. I don't know why. I really liked it. I thought it was really pretty, so we're shouting it out here. Most of the plot of this episode is May and Yo-Yo going to Afterlife to visit Jiaying in hopes that Jiaying can help Yo-Yo get her inhuman powers back so that Yo-Yo can pull out the little piece of the time drive that's causing it to constantly jump so the Zephyr doesn't explode in on itself or just, kill everyone. We get to see Deech and Lockman again as Jiaying, and we get to go to Afterlife. Oh, this was such a good episode. episode. And I thought that it was really awesome that they were able to bring her back, especially after just like watching her at the Wizard World panel and now finding out a few weeks later, like a month later, that she's back. That's amazing. I love that. I think May and Yo-Yo are particularly good pairing for this little side mission, side plot, because they have these very dry, contained, tense sense of humor. They're very annoyed. Jiaying is all about herbal remedies and meditation and acupuncture, and May and Yo-Yo do not have any time for that. Like, they're not interested in that. They want a nice quick cure-all. They want an explanation for why Yo-Yo's powers no longer work, get it fixed so that they can fix the time drive on the Zephyr and they can worry about their next problem, because they don't have time for this, literally. Having the little quips that they have going back and forth and their just general annoyance and having to wait and having to go through all of this it's fun. They're great. I love the fact that their two characters work off of each other so well. It was a good time. Back to the pretty camera work. We get this shot of the door and we should get it shot from this angle, and then we switch to a more neutral angle, and I don't know why, but I loved that camera angle and I loved the editing and putting those two shots together. I personally would have liked the camera angle hanging down here to have stuck around for a little bit longer, maybe for Jiaying's entrance and then cut to that neutral angle. Either way, it was really, really pretty. I went back and watched it a few times and I was like, oh, that looks good. Camera work on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm loving it, and I don't know why that particular angle caught my attention, but it did. So I'm mentioning here, that's kind of what the point of these reviews are, talk about things that I liked, and that was one of the things that I liked. And Eli Gonda, the director, if he's the one who chose that shot, good job on him, and whoever captured that gorgeous angle, love that. It was really pretty. And that scene itself was really fun, where Jiaying first meets with May and Yo-Yo. We get this really great bit with the diviner where Yo-Yo grabs it with her hand and there's like this tense music and it's immediately undercut when she grabs it with her hand. And you're sort of thinking, oh yeah, well, she's inhuman, it's fine. And then May coughs and you're like, oh, she has the prosthetic hand, and then she touches it to her face, and I was like, that was good. And we get another moment like that later on when May and Yo-Yo are sitting on the rug and May makes a comment about wanting to drink lots of whiskey to get her through this because the last thing she wants to deal with is emotions and touchy-feely stuff. May and Yo-Yo are both sitting together on these rugs. I think May has her hands on both of Yo-Yo's knees and they're like waiting for something to happen, and there's this tense music, and then it's immediately undercut by Yo-Yo being like, yeah, nothing's happening, and like May just feeling her embarrassment and them realizing like this is not going to work for us, and it turning into a fight sequence. And then we get to see Yo-Yo starting to really work through her problems. We get these flashbacks. We see her mention Keller's death earlier during that scene where she's undergoing all the acupuncture, and then you actually get to see the flashback of her swallowing the shrike. We get to see a flashback of Tessa's death. We get to see a flashback of Ruby's death. We get to see a flashback of her uncle's death that gets a little bit more explanation later on in the episode. Yo-Yo stole her grandmother's necklace, and in the process, somebody that was harassing her uncle and her father ends up killing her uncle because she stole the necklace, and so she feels that immense amount of guilt. And so throughout her entire life, she's constantly been holding back. I love the fact that we got to explore this with Yo-Yo's character in this episode. And I particularly love mental health storylines in general. I think there's a really great line from Jiaying in this episode where she mentions that just because it's in your head doesn't make it any less real. And you have a similar line from Harry Potter during King's Cross and Deathly Hallows that conveys essentially the same idea. I particularly love mental health storylines in movies, TV shows, books, what have you, because you really get to see the character go through a journey of catharsis. You get to see them work through a lot of the problems and things they've been holding on to and learn to let go, and you just get to feel the weight that's being lifted off the character's shoulders, and you get to see them go through all of that and have that sort of light bulb moment as they realize what things they can do to manage the stress, the anxiety, the guilt, the depression, whatever it is that they're dealing with, and work towards being better. And I think that a lot of things could be improved in this world if we had more conversations about mental health and what it is that goes on inside all of our heads and our minds, because I think that's responsible for a lot of problems, even if we can't physically see it. I love the fact that this show took a moment to really focus on that, because there was kind of a lot of back and forth as to what it was that was really going on with Yo-Yo. Initially we were like, okay, it's the Shrike. Then we see her try to use her speed and it sort of seems like maybe she's holding back, so like maybe it is in her head. And then as we get later into the episodes, we're like, well, it has to be the Shrike because there's no way she could be holding back for this long. And then we've kind of come 360 and we find out, no, it is all in her head. It's all just a mental block. And so getting to see Yo-Yo work through that, get to have more of her backstory through that, is really smart writing. And I think Yo-Yo as a character is normally one that gets sidelined for other characters' stories. I think a large part of that is because she kind of, for the most part, seems to sort of have her shit together in most of the seasons. You don't really see her having to work through a lot of stuff. She's more so having to deal with other characters working through stuff. So it's nice to give her a moment to deal with everything that's been going on with her and let her have her own personal journey in this episode. And I really loved that. And particularly when she reaches that realization that she doesn't need to bounce back, she's able to access more of her powers than she ever thought. She doesn't return to that same place that she originally was. She's able to stay where she is and she's able to fix the time drive. Oh, that scene was so pretty. The VFX on it of her running and using her power again. Oh, it felt amazing because I really wasn't sure if she was going to be able to use her power again, and she did it, and it made me so happy. I was just so glad that that ended well, because this episode had me very, very, very stressed, and I feel like all of my stress is maybe more so needed for next week's episode, but we'll see, and we'll get to that in a minute. This was just another real good storyline. It made me happy to see Yo-Yo working through all of that and being able to break through that barrier. She's great. So the last thing we need to talk about in relation to Afterlife before we talk about everything that happened on the Zephyr. Cora. Daisy has a half-sister. Yay! She has some sort of inhuman ability. I can't really tell you what it is. The VFX really confused me. I think it's some sort of fire ability, but could also be something with like, oh god, I don't know, I want to say like electricity, but that's not the word that I'm looking for. Like EMPs, like something static pulse. I don't know. It seems like a fire ability because she's able to burn people and scorch rooms, and Jiaying talks about her having almost burned down Afterlife several times. It seems like it's some sort of fire ability, but the VFX doesn't make it look like that. So I don't, if it's some version of fire, I don't know. Am I just like dumb? Is it just going over my head completely as to what her ability is? Should it be obvious and I just don't know? Anyway, she has a really powerful ability, but she doesn't know how to control it and burst at random points. And so Jiaying realizes that she's a threat to Afterlife and to the people in its sanctuary, so she wants to take Cora's power away. Cora starts to feel like a prisoner. She feels like her life and her destiny and her free will has been taken into somebody else's hands. That doesn't make her very happy. She is going to shoot herself, and in the normal version of the timeline, I'm assuming she does kill herself, and then Daisy somehow ends up being born. I'm assuming maybe we'll get more answers as to what it is that really happens there in later episodes as we find out more about Cora, but she doesn't end up killing herself because Nathaniel Malick comes in with his quake powers and convinces her to join his side, because that's exactly what we need. Two Inhumans that are now hell-bent on anarchy. That's great. So Nathaniel Malick, when we first met him, I was like, oh, this guy's fun. He thinks he can take Daisy's Inhuman powers, and I thought, you know, that would be the end of it. But no, now he has Sybil and her time stream and knows way more information than he should. He is mad that he doesn't have Inhuman powers, that there's people that are just given it that he doesn't think deserves it, and so he's like, yeah, the stars, what's written in the stars, I should have died, you should have died, and let's screw that, let's just cause chaos and whatever. Like, what is his end goal? What does he want? I don't know, and it bothers me because I feel like he's such a terrible villain for the 7th season. Like, I don't want to be complaining about him because I'm like, if he's the villain we get, then like, that's fine, because we've had way worse villains before. If anything, I should be happy, but I feel like it's gonna get worse. It's gonna have to get worse. But I mean, come on. What does he want? And my big question is like, Where is Gideon Malik during all of this? Is he still building up Hydra's ranks? Are we gonna see him later on in the season again with like this whole Hydra army? I think the Triskelion, we're gonna see that at some point later on this season. Does that have to do something with Hydra? What is it that's going on with the timeline now that there's been all of these changes? I just have like a bajillion and one questions as to like what the enemy is. Who are we fighting? What is happening? It just seems like Nathaniel's goals, what he wants, seem very small-minded, and he just seems to just want to hurt people. Like, he doesn't seem to have a purpose or a goal, and that's not fun. It seems very stereotypical villain. So we'll see what it is that he gets up to as we get into later episodes. But this whole Nathaniel and Cora thing, I'm not a fan. And, you know, I thought Nathaniel was fun originally. I was like, oh, scary villain, and now I just want nothing to do with him. Like, I'm just done with him. Just no. So then we get to the Zephyr, and I think a lot of my comments about this section of the episode are just some of the really funny lines that are in this section. We get to see Deke and Sousa inside of the control panel for the Zephyr trying to fix it, and Deke makes a comment about telling Sousa to step back because electricity is dangerous, and Sousa makes a comment about what do I look like to you in a Neanderthal, and then Enoch, who is not part of this conversation, steps in and has this really brilliant one-liner about how he spent time with Neanderthals and how Sousa looks nothing like a Neanderthal. I can't remember the line, but what stuck out to me is Joel Stoffer's delivery. He gets all of these really brilliant Enoch lines, and it's not the lines themselves that are memorable, it's his delivery of them. Joel Stoffer is so amazing as Enoch, and I feel like he doesn't get enough appreciation for the role that he's played because he just makes the best comments at the best times. I think another thing that works really well for his character is that he has lots of other really wonderful actors to react to him and bounce off of his ridiculous comments, and it's a fun time. And we get to see Deke Shaw get to sort of be one of those characters in this episode. They have a moment later on in the episode where Deke talks to Enoch about missing the 80s, and Enoch mentions that he can like keep rhythm or something along those lines, and it was just really funny. And Joel Stoffer in particular improv'd that line, and it was very good. And I was very happy to see Deke and Enoch together, the Fitzsimmons family. I just love these characters so much, and the writing and the moments that they're given. They're just so wholesome. In addition to getting several good Enoch moments in this episode, we get several good Sousa moments in this episode. Sousa is preparing parachutes in case everyone has to jump off of the Zephyr, and Gemma comes in, and Sousa immediately apologizes to Gemma for the way that he treated her before, and Gemma is immediately understanding because they pulled Sousa out of time. He had to have been overwhelmed, and Sousa responds with, that's not an excuse. And I just love that his character is like that he immediately recognizes the fault in his actions, wants to help, wants to be a part of the team, and doesn't want to blame Gemma because he sees that she's trying her hardest to deal with a situation where really nobody knows what's going on, and they're just kind of playing it by ear, and recognizing that that's not her fault that it's happening. There's really nothing she can do. It's just out of her control. I'm just so curious to see how Sousa's character develops throughout the rest of this season, because it feels like we're starting to get to the point where chaos is erupting and where bad things are going to be happening in every episode. All of our hearts are going to be wrecked and stepped on and crushed into a million pieces. Not ready for it yet, but it makes me curious as to where all of the characters are going to end up and where their stories end and what sort of development is happening and what little moments will I look back on later on and be like, oh, that's leading up to that, and tiny bits of foreshadowing that I may not realize are happening. And Ver does such a good job with Sousa. He's just such a great character, and I love the fact that he had that moment and we let him apologize and let him recognize his wrongdoing for those actions. And Gemma also gives him a prosthetic leg, and so we get to see him be able to walk normally. It makes my heart so happy. Like, that's such a good moment between their two characters. Then we get the scene after that, which is much worse. It's a good scene. It's a really endearing scene. Gemma is recording a video message for Fitz, and she talks to him about how nothing can split them apart, time, space, distance, whatever, because they'll always love each other. It's really romantic and endearing and sweet, and I loved this scene. It was great. But you wanna know what ruined it for me? Deke walking in and watching this, as he has tears in his eyes, tears in his eyes as he is watching this. Normally I would be like, aw, that's cute, that's sweet. But the look on his face was the look of somebody who's going to do something heroically stupid. And I don't like that look. That look scares me, and it made me, for a moment, long for season 5 DBack, who was skilled in self-preservation and would never do anything stupid enough to get himself killed, because I need that Deke right now because I want him to live, and he just doesn't seem like he is going to do something that is going to allow for his survival. If anything, it seems like he's going to do something reckless and stupid to endanger himself in order to help the people that he loves, and I love that. Like, that's great character development, but I don't want him to die. Like, that's not what I want. Like, I just saw that facial expression and I was like, oh, he's gonna do something dumb. He's gonna do something heroically stupid, and I'm going to want to cry and hug him and punch him in the face at the same time. That's not what I want for myself right now. I just need him to live. Like, that's all I want. You can beat him around as much as you want. He just needs to stay alive. All I'm asking. Not that hard of a request. I just want him to live. It's all I want. But oh, the tears in his eyes as he's watching that, I know whatever's going on inside his head is not good for his well-being and his self-preservation. So that's great. And lastly, let's talk about LMD Coulson. LMD Coulson. He seems tired. He spent 1.5 years as a television and couldn't eat, couldn't drink, couldn't do anything human, and now he's finally getting his LMD body back, and he just seems tired. He just seems done. He talks about being unable to feel happiness or not really knowing what happiness is, because he just describes himself as a bunch of ones and zeros, but what Daisy mentions, that Sousa got her out safely and that she's okay, and now she was glad that Sousa was there for her. Coulson says that makes him happy, and I'm immediately like, what is going on here? Because it looks like next week's episode is going to be a Daisy Coulson centric episode. So that'll be interesting. I love the daddy-daughter moments between Daisy and Coulson. I think we're going to be getting a lot of that in next week's episode, which will be great. But I feel like we're going somewhere with the Daisy and Sousa. Originally I thought like, oh, they're an interesting pairing, and now I'm like, are we like doing something romantic there? Is there something flirty there? Because we haven't gotten anything overtly romantic. But I don't know. I feel like something big is gonna happen in next week's episode that's gonna answer that question, wherever the hell that's going. But oh, that moment, it got me. And then we see Sousa sitting down to watch over Daisy in the healing chamber, and he's done that a few times. I'm like, he feels this need to look over her. He's protective of her. He doesn't care about Peggy Carter anymore. He's all into Daisy now. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I just have so many questions, and I'm so scared. Okay, so I think that's about it for my thoughts on season 7, episode 8. I had so much fun with 707 because it was this really great bottle episode where I just got to sit back and have fun, and now I'm starting to get stressed and anxious watching these episodes because I just don't know what's gonna happen to any of the characters. There's all these tiny little things, and I don't know what they mean. I don't know what the implications of them are gonna be, and it's making me very overwhelmed and anxious. But overall, I enjoyed this episode. I was glad to see Yo-Yo get to go through her own personal journey as a character and get to see some small moments of development for our characters on the S.H.I.E.L.D. team. Next week's episode looks horrifying. I think everyone's gonna die over and over again until Daisy and Coulson can get them out of the time storm. So that'll be great. But Elizabeth Henstridge directed it, which is amazing for her, and I bet she did a wonderful job. I'm really excited to watch it. If you have any thoughts on this episode, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to follow me on social media, all of my links are in the description. Lemons to all of you. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time in a new one. Goodbye.